Okay, start.
So friends, we are now up to the valedictory function. For the last 3 days, we have had very good academics. We would now conclude with this session. I would now invite Professor Mohapatra, our advisor AOPA, to chair the session.
Notice I have
Professor
come.
Mohapatra. Sir. And now Professor
Thanks
Mohanty
for.
will give the welcome address under the chairpersonship of Professor Mohapatra. Over to Professor Mohapatra.
के वेलकम करिवे
सर सरोज सर करिवे
अच्छा so very good
Good afternoon.
afternoon. Now it's going to evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am very happy that in this session our guest is our very own Professor
सर मन नेट ऑफ हो गला कोन
So let me
सर
welcome all of you to this valedictory function. I'm happy that Professor Pradhan could make it convenient to join us in this function. We had a marathon session, and the winner is Professor Ganesh Prasad Das in this race.
Sir,
And we had all these functions, all these activities, and he has been the guiding force, the person who has been guiding us. And in addition to our advisor, he is also our guide and advisor during these 3 days.
Okay, sorry about this internet
Okay.
disconnection temporary. So now let me request Professor Saroj Kumar Mohanty, the president of the association, to give the welcome address.
Thank you, sir. I welcome you all, especially Professor R.C. Pradhan, to our midst. We are going to the end of this 3-day session, and you will all agree that it has been a very successful session during these COVID times. Last 2 years, we have been conducting this online meet, and earlier we were holding 2-day sessions, but on these 2 occasions we are having 3-day sessions, and we have found that it has been very successful, and we have given sufficient time to our paper readers. Earlier, we used to arrange this paper reading in 3 different rooms simultaneously, so you can attend only one session. But this year and also the last year, we are conducting them separately. We have extended for 3 days, and when we really meet offline, so let us hope that next year we can meet offline in person. This practice of having the sessions separately and holding it for 3 days will also try to do this. So I welcome all of you to this valedictory function. I now request Professor Ganesh Prasad Das to introduce the guests.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Shubha Sitala Paranna. Namaskar to everybody. This is the third and concluding day of the 34th session of All Odisha Philosophy Association, taking place in the virtual platform, where places and times lose their substantiality. We have here in the valedictory section the Executive President of the Association, Professor S.K. Mohanty, and the General President of the session, Professor Godavari Mishra, a very dear personality in the form of Professor Ramesh Chandra Pradhan as the chief guest of the session in our midst. Along with them, the advisor of AOPA, Professor P.K. Mohapatra, chairing the session, the General Secretary, Dr. B.C. Sahoo, the Treasurer, Dr. B.K. Das, and the Chief Editor of AOPA, Professor Ramchandra Majhi, the Organizing Secretary, Dr. Mohapatra, are present and present with us all the 3 days. The chief guest, Professor Ramesh Chandra Pradhan, hails from Odisha, graduated from Ravenshaw, took admission in the PG Department of Philosophy, but shifted to BHU, where he got his PG and PhD degrees. He served for a period in Rajendra College, Bolangir, came over to the PG Department of Philosophy as a lecturer in philosophy, Banivihar, and Banivihar has not been able to keep him as he shifted to Karnataka University, Dharwad, and then to University of Hyderabad, where he became a professor and the head of the department and superannuated there and almost settled there at Hyderabad. He also had his postdoctoral studies at the University of Oxford as a Commonwealth Academic Staff Fellow during 1991. He acted as the Member Secretary of the Indian Council of Philosophical Research, New Delhi, from 2000 to 2003. He is an awardee of Senior Research Fellowship of Indian Council of Philosophical Research and National Fellowship of Indian Institute of Advanced Studies, Shimla. Professor Pradhan's PhD work, 1977, is an endeavor to study Kant from early Wittgenstein's point of view. He specializes also in philosophy of language, philosophy of mind. He has authored several books in this area and edited several volumes. He has contributed many research papers to referred journals of philosophy. Among the books are Philosophy of Meaning and Representation, 1996, Recent Developments in Analytic Philosophy, 2001, The Great Mirror, an essay on Wittgenstein's Tractatus, 2002, Language and Mind, Volume 1, Western Perspective, edited, 2006, Language, Reality and Transcendence, an essay on the main strands of Wittgenstein's later philosophy, 2008, Metaphysics, 2009, Linguistic Representations, The Road Ahead, 2012, Philosophy of Wittgenstein, Indian Responses, 2013, Mind, Meaning and World, A Transcendental Perspective, 2019, and Metaphysics of Consciousness, The Indian Vedantic Perspective, 2020. To add to this, his latest book, as per my information, is The Early Philosophy of Dayakrishna, 2021. It seems to me that Ramesh Chandra Pradhan has within him a yogi, as he takes everything of the complex world easily with a smile. Thank you very much. And now over to Professor P.K. Mohapatra for the rest of the job.
Thank you, Dr. Das, for a very special introduction and very elaborate also to Dr. Pradhan, which he richly deserves. Called him a yogi. Okay. He is really, in that sense, he knows only how to study, how to research, and how to write, and he keeps it on and on. We are very happy that he's with us, and we will have the privilege of listening to him. Professor Pradhan, please.
Please unmute,
Please.
sir. Sir, please unmute.
Sorry. Respected Professor Mohapatra, the advisor of AOPA, and Professor Saroj Mohanty, the president of AOPA, Professor Prasad Das, the vice president, Professor G. Misra, the general president of this session of AOPO, and all my esteemed friends in the audience. It is really a great privilege on my part to be part of this valedictory session, and also to be in the midst of my gurus like Professor Mohapatra and Professor Mohanty and Professor Ganesh Das, and my friends like Ranjit Ghosh and many of my students who have now become established academicians in the state. So I am really very happy to be part of this session. I must congratulate AOPA for conducting its activities for the last 34 years without interruption, under the able and sagacious leadership of Professor Mohapatra, and then, of course, Professor Mohanty and Professor Ganesh Prasad Das. These three luminaries have really kept the torch of philosophy burning in Orissa. In spite of all kinds of hardships, philosophy has survived in our present world, especially in our world, that is in India, and more so in Orissa. Philosophy is not, as we know, that not a very prized subject in the community of different subjects, but yet philosophy has survived. And that is because of the dedicated scholars like all of you, that philosophy is still alive. Therefore, everybody in the AOPA, from the advisor to the last member of the association, deserve to be congratulated, because without the participation of the teachers and students, the association itself cannot function. And when there is a harmony at the leadership level, it always percolates to the lowest level, and then only an association can function. And I wish AOPA will continue its activities in Orissa and be a model association for the whole country. And as far as I know from my first-hand experience, AOPA has its journal, and it has its publication wing, which is headed by Professor Maji. And therefore, people must write for this journal. I hope most of the papers with little modification may be accepted for the journal. But that is the best way of going forward. Unless we print our words, print our thoughts into words, they do not get tangibility, they do not get a life of their own. So it is better that AOPA continues its deliberations and also publication. With these words, I once again congratulate all of you for making this association a lively and continuous one. Coming to the today's concerns, which I have in my mind and which I will share with you, will be something related to philosophy, but philosophy as concerned with human life. So my thoughts will be concerning how philosophy can enrich human life. Philosophy can achieve many other things, but one of its perhaps possible relevance will be how it enriches our life, how it makes us better human beings. So let me begin with a fact which everybody knows, that this is the year 100 years of the publication of the Tractatus. And this event is being celebrated all over the world, including India, because it was a landmark classic which has been in continuous flow in the last 100 years. I will take a clue from that book, from that classic. It is regarding life itself. Wittgenstein is one of the great philosophers for whom philosophy and life we are very much inseparable. In fact, he lived his philosophy, the basic philosophical ideas that he had, he lived them. Therefore, for him, life and philosophy were always inseparable. So the statement that I am referring to is from the Tractatus. It will be like this: when all possible scientific questions have been solved, the problems of life remain unsolved. That is a paraphrase of that famous statement in the Tractatus. Of course, he goes on to say there are no problems of life left, but that has to be understood with a pinch of salt, in the sense that the problems of life are no more to be solved at the level of science. So they have to be kept aside for a resolution which he thought science cannot make, but we have to fall back on something which he called mystical, something which he called the higher. And that philosophy again will address, but not the science-oriented philosophy. Now, why I start with this statement is the fact that we are living in the age of science. And science has really occupied the whole space of what we call valid and acceptable thought. So, therefore, philosophy has also taken a back seat in the contemporary world, precisely because science doesn't allow for any competitor accepting another science. Philosophy has ceased to be a competitor with science. But in the classical and also modern period, science and philosophy were competitors. In the time of Kant, Hegel, and many others, philosophy was a competitor with science, and philosophy was given a higher status than science. But why it has changed in the recent years, especially in the 20th century, the fact that philosophical thoughts have been really given a kind of a lesser importance, and much of the glory of philosophy, which is really metaphysics, ethics, and so on, were really given a short shrift, because it was thought that metaphysics is competing with science, but it cannot prove its results, and therefore metaphysics must be put aside. But the misfortune is that metaphysics has never died, and it continues to thrive because it cannot die. Human mind is so enriched that mere scientific thinking doesn't satisfy the human mind. So human mind always explores new avenues of raising those fundamental questions which philosophers like Socrates and Plato had raised about life itself, how philosophy can make life more noble, more sublime. And these questions, of course, remained in the periphery. Contemporary philosophers, of course, some of them are, for example, Wittgenstein himself, and in the continent, Heidegger, Sartre, they have really raised those questions again, once again. And all of them have really resisted the onslaught of scientific thinking, what is known as scientism. They have resisted this. And that is for the good of the mankind, because science cannot really solve all the problems of life, or all the problems, including the problems of life. Science itself uh, is an enterprise which is being re-evaluated from time to time. Science also, in its best moments, admits its inadequacies, and therefore, the haughty science, the hot-headed science of the early 19th century and perhaps some part of 20th century, those hot days of science are over. Science itself is questioned uh, for its regarding its foundations, regarding its method of validating truth, and so on and so forth. Anyway, let me come back to the question why life is so important for the mankind. I do not mean life only of human beings, but also life as such in the universe. As Wittgenstein himself suggested in the Tractatus, against the voice of science of that time, and perhaps to some extent he succumbed to it. Therefore, he pushed everything to the realm of the mystical. But without being mystical, also, one could have solved those problems, but that was not to be, because Wittgenstein didn't have the opportunity, at least in the Tractatus, to resist science. He accepted science as it is, and its dominance was very much accepted by him. But the question that he raised, and which remained in his consciousness till the end of his life, was this: why human life needs to be examined, why human life should be taken seriously. Uh, Perhaps one is reminded of a Socratic statement, or the Socratic dictum, that an unexamined life is not worth living. Somebody has paraphrased it otherwise, that an unexamined life is as good as the life of uh, life of uh, life of a pig. So these are the ways we have heard how this Socratic wisdom has been understood. It was the effort of Plato, for example, to elevate the human mind, the human life itself, beyond what he called the sensuous life. That was his effort. In the imagery of the cave, he showed us that beyond the cave-like life of the sensuous human being, the human being who is addicted to the worldly life, who is immersed in the worldly life, he in fact showed a way out of it. Though we may not agree that the Plato's way of uh, talking about a transmigrating soul and the rest of it, but the basic message is very clear that whatever may be the nature of the soul and the rest of it, even if we do not buy those Greek ideas, including those ideas of the classical Indian philosophy, that there is a soul and the soul migrates and we are heading towards a rebirth, not only one rebirth, many rebirths. Let us forget about those highly speculative ideas, because they do not make much sense either, in the sense that even if one doesn't believe in rebirth, even if one doesn't believe in transmigration of the soul, we can still believe that there is a higher nature of the human being. There is a higher consciousness in a human being. all human beings are endowed with the capacity to go beyond the limited consciousness. This has been one of the very basic tenets of Advaita and the whole Vedantic system, is that we are endowed with a higher capacity, a higher consciousness, and let us realize it. That was how Vedanta put it. That is, our consciousness is not only the bodily one, the one which is circumscribed by the conditional factors in the world, but it can rise above it. This was the message of the Vedanta. Though the different ways of articulating might differ, but the fact remains that human beings do everywhere, not only in India or in a particular country, everywhere human beings have the capacity to rise above themselves. Now, this idea of rising above oneself is peculiarly, in a sense, metaphysical, one can say. It is not that we give up our basic biological existence and run away from it. All that a Vedantic knowledge or any system of philosophy, perhaps, including the great systems of philosophy in the West, the indications are that there is something ethical and spiritual in human consciousness. And ethics is basically born out of the sense of the higher, sense of a higher value, sense of something which is more ethically appreciable than something else. So this constant enterprise to have a better understanding of human life in terms of ethics, in terms of, to some extent at least, religion. I'm not talking of the formalized religions, but the very basic instinct of religion in man. Leave aside those organized religions. They have really deformed the very nature of human life. Rather, human life would have been better if those organized religions would not have existed. But the basic instinct in man to understand things spiritually, to understand the meaning of existence, meaning of human existence, and meaning of existence as such, these are perennial questions. In the sense, it is from philosophy that these questions have arisen. When, for example, say Kant says that we have to go beyond beyond nature, beyond the physical nature to realize freedom. Freedom is nominal for him, and this physical world is phenomenal. That basic distinction which he makes, it still is meaningful, because within nature itself, as Wittgenstein himself has very much reaffirmed, that within the factual world you cannot locate the meaning of the world itself. So in order to understand the meaning of life itself, we cannot simply look to the physical conditions in which we live, including our biological nature. We have to seek something which is higher, seek something which goes beyond the limits of the natural world. And that is why Kant says that freedom can be realized. Freedom of the will, he talks of freedom of the will, but that is freedom of the human spirit. That must be beyond the natural world. That's why he suggested that you can live in the natural world, but you have to go beyond it to realize freedom. The same thing is reiterated by Hegel, for example, when he says that the human spirit really goes beyond the boundary of nature, because nature itself, according to him, is a free expression of the spirit. Of course, I am using the metaphysical language of Hegel only to suggest that we can learn from them It is not that we have to really reaffirm what they have said, but we have to really understand why did they say that there is a spirit above nature. If the natural world would have been the be-all and end-all of existence, if the universe had been simply physical, how absurd it would look that a physical world has given rise to a human species and species of all other kinds with consciousness at various degrees. And how wonderful it is that the human mind has been a product of this natural history. And once the human mind has arrived on the scene, the whole meaning of the world has changed. We have understood the world scientifically, we have understood the world artistically, we have also understood the world theologically, and there are many ways of understanding the world, and that includes understanding human life. So, in a sense, what I would like to suggest to my young friends, that let us take our classical philosophy seriously. If we get bogged down only in contemporary thinking, like analytic philosophy, like phenomenology, or like deconstruction, if we get ourselves involved only with this, then we will be suffering from one-sided diet, as Wittgenstein himself suggested. Philosophy has suffered from one-sided diet, and this will be one-sided diet. If I prefer to be for example, a anti-rationalist, or if I prefer to be a rationalist only, or if I prefer to be a deconstructionist only, then perhaps the philosophical vision will be distorted. Philosophy is not bound by any ideology, however beautiful that ideology may be, like Marxism, like rationalism, like scientism. These are all ideologies. If philosophical mind is bogged down by ideology, then that will be the end of the philosophical quest. Philosophy itself is the product of a free thinking. Philosophy itself is the greatest gift of the human mind to the humankind, in the sense that if man's mind would not have been what it is today, then philosophy itself would not have been born. That means if man's mind would have been only juggling with the facts, if man's mind would have been juggling with what is there before him given, then it could have never speculated about what is possible, what is higher, what is other than what is given. So this search for the other one, something other, that perhaps is also spirit of the science. Science itself has never remained static. But philosophy has remained much more dynamic. See the different kinds of philosophies that human mind has created. From Indian philosophy to Western philosophy, every country, every society has a philosophy. That means philosophy is the prerogative of the human mind, and therefore any philosophical speculation. Every philosophical thinking has a short life. For example, analytic philosophy had a different phases, and now the latest phase it is no more analytic in the traditional sense of the term. It is more speculative. It is more open to other kinds of thinking. Similarly, what we call continental philosophy is also not one philosophy. There are many philosophies. This variety, the varieties of ways of thinking does suggest that human mind is never bound by any particular way of thinking. So this spirit of philosophy must really get into our mind, in the sense that as we grow, we go through different phases of philosophize. Some philosophies that attract us. Some philosophers become our model, but never believe that they are the final or the last words of philosophy. No philosophy is the last word. Perhaps future, let's imagine 100 years after, philosophy will be something different. Or could have different terminologies, different methods of understanding. What we must understand is that human mind has a continuous history. So therefore, philosophy itself has a continuous history. And we must look back to past in order to understand the present and perhaps to anticipate the future. So in this sense, my understanding is that we must read philosophies, read the philosophers, of course, according to our choice, freely, but always keeping in mind that this may not be the last word. And therefore, as our friend suggested, always a counter perspective is there. So everything has a counter perspective. And with these words, I would like to conclude by saying that it is the philosophy which can really, not only it is a product of the human mind, but it can also enrich the human mind, because all human minds are not on the same level. So the greatest of the human minds have always been at the vanguard, and others have to follow them. So in this sense, life can be enriched by ideas, and life can be enriched by philosophical reflection. And the end of philosophy should, as the great Indian philosopher Buddha suggested, that it should also alleviate human suffering, because man definitely suffers at different levels. And so if philosophy can give a healing touch to the human soul, I accept the view that there is a soul in man, in the sense that there is a noble nature in man, which is in everybody. And that noble nature should be liberated from many other conditions which cause suffering. So if philosophy can give us enlightenment, philosophy can lead us to a better plane of living, that will be the greatness of philosophy. So I must say that philosophy should be pursued by our young friends and those who do not make it a profession also can study it. It is not necessary that philosophy should be treated as a professional subject. It should be just as we read poetry, novels, and we read many other things. So we also read philosophy for pleasure at one level, philosophy for inspiration for another level, and for spiritual liberation at the highest level. So with these words, I once again thank all of you for giving a patient listening, and I'm thankful to all of you for inviting me to this occasion to share my views. I will be happy if some discussion takes place on this, as it has been given in the invitation card that some discussions are likely to take place. So let me take leave of you by saying again, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
It was a wonderful presentation, as we expected. Professor Pradhan, thank you for this. Since
Thank
you
you.
want some discussions, we may have some discussions on this on his speech for about 15 minutes. Participants may ask some questions, but very pointed questions. That's because Professor Pradhan wanted some discussions. Otherwise, is there any question or clarification that you may want, some of you may want?
Sir, we
from me?
have in the agenda observations by the participants. So please invite any.
Yes.
Participants not to discuss Professor Pradhan's paper or
Okay.
Professor Pradhan's address. That is about the whole session.
Okay.
The
Yeah.
validity session.
Yeah.
This validity session. How they felt about the all these
Session
3 days.
itself. Yeah. I took it otherwise. So, okay. That's very nice.
Okay,
Okay.
okay.
Thank you
Okay.
very much.
Things are now made clear. Uh, shall we wait for the observation after this meeting, or Ganesh? What exactly you want?
Pardon?
By observation by participants, it will
In this
come
meeting. Okay, now they have to give their because this is the concluding session. They want to say something just as Professor Ganesh Prasad has mentioned, but very few words. Yes, sir. Professor Das can also start the.
Really, these 3 days we had wonderful experience, academic experience. I mean, very good discussions on different aspects of philosophical problems, Western and Indian. And then we had the General President's address by Godavari Mishra. That was very much enlightening. And to cap it all, we had this afternoon the very enlightening speech by Professor Pradhan. We are
Yes.
grateful to all of them and hope that this spirit will continue in future to AOPA. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Das. We have had a very enlightening lecture by our chief guest in this session. He has rightly emphasized on 2 points. One is the importance of life, that is what matters, and the other is on the connection or interconnection between science and philosophy or metaphysics. These are very important questions. Life is important because all philosophers, be they absolutists, be they materialists, be they pragmatists, for all of them, life matters. Anything that is not relevant to life should not be taken seriously, and philosophers have not taken them seriously. When 2,500 years back, when Protagoras declared that man is the measure of everything, he was misunderstood because everybody went up against it, and he got the bad name of being a very not very good philosopher, and what he meant was the importance of human life, importance of life and man. And after quite a long time, during the time of when you came to the period when William James and John Dewey were talking about pragmatism, then the importance of man and his life was realized. Life is taken seriously unless that is done, as Professor Pradhan has rightly drawn our attention to, then if that philosophy will not really matter. And science and philosophy, they are not opposed to each other. They are not competitors. It's not a question. We should not consider the issue like it is an issue between science and philosophy or metaphysics, but science or metaphysics, it should be an issue of science and metaphysics. So both of them should complement each other, and they have been doing that. When Einstein, in his later years, declared that we have to look to Eastern intellectualism for many of the questions that science could not answer, that shows that science and philosophy are not opposed to each other, science and metaphysics are not opposed to each other. They must complement each other. Well, Dr. Pradhan has also mentioned that scientific views go on changing. Yes, it's like a hypothesis. Hypothesis is the spirit of science. It works on probability. And a hypothesis, when it is verified, it becomes a kind of law or things like that. But then also that doesn't become the final word. Similarly, in philosophy, he has again drawn our attention to this fact that there is no last word in philosophy. Philosophical perspectives are many. We were discussing that also yesterday. Like Indian philosophy, philosophy itself is not a unitary concept. Philosophy itself is a conglomeration of pluralities of ideas. And that we have to consider them as such. And nothing is a final word, nothing is the last word. So very nicely, so very aptly put by Professor Pradhan. Now, what is important is your mind must always be engaged in the exercise, in exercising or analyzing the ideas. And that is how we have different types of philosophy. But overemphasizing on one aspect or one theory will not be the right approach. And that is what has been the outcome of at least today's speech. Nothing is philosophy doesn't have no philosophical theory is the last word. Well, we were really enlightened and benefited by this wonderful presentation by Professor Pradhan. Thank you very much, Professor Pradhan.
Thank you, sir.
And
Thank you
really
very much, sir.
made this session a very worthwhile session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Sir, may I speak one sentence?
Yes, yes.
This is when we are students in Ravenshaw during 1970-71. We have gone through a book, set of books, History of Philosophy, Eastern and Western. And there Professor Humayun Kabir wrote the introduction to it. And there the line says, and that is the motto of philosophy, that one who follows this path never tire, because this is both the way and the destination. This is what philosophy is, and my friend Professor Pradhan has very nicely put it before us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
As long
Thank
as
you.
man continues, life continues, philosophy continues.
Philosophy will remain.
Thank you. Now, that should be we should be thanked by somebody for this session.
By the General Secretary.
General Secretary, Dr. Sahoo, please. Vote of thanks.
Bhaskar, please.
Dr. Bhaskar Sahu.
Dr. Bhaskar Chandra Sahoo. Please open the vote of thanks.
Respected President of the session, Professor, as President of the Association, Saroj sir, Vice President, Ganesh sir, General President of the session, Professor Godavari Mishra sir, and today's our chief guest of this occasion, Ramesh sir, was my teacher. I also all my regards and respects to sir. This is we are fortunate to have with this occasion as the guest, and our editor, Chief Editor Professor Ramachandra Majhi, my friend, our treasurer, Dr. Basant Kumar Das, Ranjit sir, Dhaneshwar sir, and many other teachers are there. I am respecting all my teachers, and I also our local secretary, which Professor Ganesh sir has said, the surrogated secretary, local secretary or organizing secretary, Lakshman. He has organized. Actually, we have planned to host this session in the GM College, GM University. Unfortunately, it was not there due to the COVID. So the Professor Mohin and Arasok Torai and other faculty members, both all have been affected by the COVID. So, and this all these works has been done by our lieutenant and active member, the general. He is the general secretary, so to say, Lakshman Patra, Dr. Lakshman Patra. I welcome you all to this occasion. I am extending heartfelt thanks to all of these members of this association, the paper presenters, and especially I am thankful to Professor Pradhan sir. He, in spite of their busy schedule, now he is with us directly. We are seeing through this screen. So we are thankful to you, and so for your enlightened speech. We are also grateful to you, sir. We will always remember you during this time of your taking the tractor test class when we are your students. From that day, we are remembering you. Thank you so much, sir. On behalf of this association, on my behalf, I extend my heartiest thanks to you. We are also grateful to you.
Thank you.
I am extending heartfelt thanks to Professor Godavarisa Misra. He has become the general secretary, general president of this association, of this session. He has delivered very nice lectures and actively participated and given a lot of suggestions and inspirations throughout the 3 days of the session. And I am thankful to our active active president, Professor Ganesh Prasad Das sir, and Professor our president Saroj sir. He is always behind with us. He is always behind the screen, and he always inspires us. And Professor sir is the head of our team. He is the advisor. He is always keeping contact with us, and we are also thankful to Professor my teacher, Professor Mohapatra sir. And I extend my heartfelt thanks to my friend, Dr. Professor Ramachandra Majhi, for his active involvement by editing this journal meticulously. And I am also thankful to some other members like Saroj, Kumar, Saroj Kantkar, and Jadeshwar Ghosh, our friend
Pattipavan Das,
Himanshu Bhushan Samal, Mohin Mohammad, and others. They have actively involved for making our journal listed in the UGC care list. That is a very great achievement. I am also thankful to the member secretary of ICPR, and he has also joined as and he has also delivered as our chief guest in the inaugural session. And we are also thankful to him, thankful to the chairman of ICPR. They have also forwarded our application for UGC for making in the UGC care list. I am thankful to Ranjit sir, Dhaneshwar sir, and others, those who are, I have not seen him in the screen. I am thankful to all, I am thanking to all the participants. They have presented their papers very nicely. Some new members, new delegates, they have new life members. They have presented the papers very nicely. So I welcome and I am thankful to all the delegates, paper presenters for their active participation and their involvement for these 3 days of this deliberation. Thanking you once again. I thanking you all.
From
Thank
us
you.
to you, thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Bhaskar Chandra Sahoo, for thanking us, and this session, very interesting and very useful session. Well, all good things must come to an
Well,
end.
thank you all,
Like this
Professor
also.
Mohapatra,
And I thank you all for that, especially to Ramesh, Pradhan, and then
Thank you, sir. Thank you, all of you.
Saroj, Mohanty, Ganesh Das, and all of you. Thank you very much, and the meeting is should be dissolved for the next session.
Thank you.
Before we
Thank
go,
Thank you.
I have a request. Please
Yes.
switch
Yes,
on your
Saroj?
video so that Lakshman can take a snap. Those who are present, your video can be, you can switch on your video so that Lakshman can take a
Let
snap.
everybody, yes.
Professor Mohapatra and myself, we are on. Lakshman,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'm taking.
I am doing this on your behalf because
Oh,
you have
okay,
been
sir. Okay, sir. Okay.
let the video.
This is how, if you take life informally, then it becomes lively. Okay.
Professor Mohapatra, Professor Pradhan, Ramesh Pradhan, we want his picture both. Professor Ramesh Pradhan. Please,
Ramesh sir kahandi pali lagi.
please turn on your camera. Professor Pradhan.
Camera on ଅଛି ପୁରା?
Saroj,
Okay.
Saroj,
Saroj.
Mochi,
Sir,
Mochi.
One minute.
Thank you, sir.
1 minute, sir.
तार फोटो उठियो कथा कने
Bhaskar, where are you?
Sir, I am not here.
We are all with you, Mr. President.
Okay. So, thank you all. We now close this session and we will begin our general body session. Or do you need a gap? Professor Ganesh Prasad Das to guide us.
After 5-10 minutes, sir. After 5-10 minutes.
After 5 minutes. Okay, 10 minutes. Let us say.
Okay, thank you. I take leave of you all.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you so much,
Thank you.
Ramesh.
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
everybody.
Thank you, sir.